With every property market downturn, there are building and development businesses everywhere that collapse, sometimes deliberately after the owners abscond with the cash. It's called phoenixing. On top of that, we've seen problems with cracking in several buildings. Steve Chandler, Property Development Director of Lefter. We got there in the end. You've got the flu and I've got a tickle in my throat. Let's try and get through this.
Yeah, well, I've got a little bit of water just sitting here, so I'm okay. I'm doing all right.
Let's talk about what happens generally when we see a building downturn.
Yeah, look, the industry, obviously when you're in a boom, everything's wonderful, everyone's making money, but then you get developers, etc., who buy properties to develop for ridiculously high prices.
Right.
The market turns, their revenues drop, and suddenly
They can't get any money either.
They can't sell their properties, no one's buying, and then they get themselves into trouble.
But generally someone has bought, and then generally someone cops it who isn't the builder.
Yeah, well, then you've got your issues like Raylan, the large-scale developer who's recently gone into liquidation. They had all this development pipeline all over Australia, and deposits have disappeared, all those sorts of things for purchases. It's ugly. It's very ugly.
And the workers too?
Yeah, look, that's the other thing is everyone focuses on the consumer, the person who's bought an apartment that gets in trouble. But behind all this, you've got all the subcontractors, the trades, the builders, all the people, the mums and dads, effectively, who have also bought the apartments. They get caught.
And what happens in regards to insurance for all of this?
So insurance, you can insure for. Here we go. We're having a coffee.
Yes, great.
Coffee bit. Insurance. You've got home warranty insurance. Lots of people think that the warranty insurance, the statutory warranties that are in place, are going to save you if something goes wrong with the building. Those policies are sort of stopgap, they're last line of defence type scenarios, and they never cover enough of the problems. Businesses can insure against losses, but not a lot of small business will do that, like plumbers and electricians, etc. They won't take out insurance against not being paid.
What about these cracks in buildings? We saw the Opal Tower last year over summer, and then we've seen it kind of a few others as well.
Yeah, so Opal Tower was interesting. It's very big in the media, obviously, because it happened on Christmas Eve.
And it was the first. It was such a shock.
It was massive too. It was a very, very large scale impact. Massive cracking, large noise. It was quite substantial from a structural perspective. What that's effectively done is made the market more aware of potential defects. Of course, following that, we had the Mascot Tower problem in Sydney, where again a finished building, almost 10 years old, was evacuated because of structural cracking and subsidence. So the building was sinking. Subsequent to that, it appears that wasn't caused necessarily by the building itself, but by adjacent construction work where they were lowering the water table, which leads to subsidence. So we've got a lot of issues here where owners of properties, so in that particular instance, Mascot Tower, they've been evacuated from a building. What do? It's insurance. The builders are going to have insurance, the strata has insurance. There's going to be 7 years of litigation and someone's going to pay at the end of that.
Yeah.
The only problem is here you've got 100, 150 owners of properties sitting there not able to access that property until
Similar situation with the cladding as well. We saw here in Melbourne, there's been a couple of issues. There was the Cross Tower fire in Docklands. Then recently there was the Neo 200 building in Spencer Street as well.
Yes.
That experience there saw people locked out of their apartments for quite a long time. They allowed them in over the following couple of months, but as you would imagine, the valuations of these apartments are nowhere near what they were beforehand.
Scary numbers now. The numbers are really impacting. The dollar values are dropping until the cladding's rectified. So you've got the list of properties in Melbourne, you've got a list of properties in Sydney that have got cladding. In Sydney, that list is public. In Melbourne, it's not. It's been kept
What do you think about that decision? I mean, that's obviously to try and help the poor home owners there who don't want their hard-earned cash to suddenly disappear. It's not their fault. And as we are seeing, many of the insurance companies are only insuring the repair of the cladding using the same cladding that was used before.
Yeah, it's a real difficult issue. I mean, recently, in social media, Tim Gurner's been out there saying, the authorities have recently said we're going to hold the builders responsible. Tim's sort of gone out and said, no, we shouldn't be holding the builder responsible. This is a whole of industry problem, and he's quite right. We've got building companies that are installing a product that they've been told complies with Australian standards.
Yes.
So what's happened is that the standards, this problem has slipped through without people knowing about it.
Well, costs go up on building sites, right?
Yeah, definitely.
And so builders obviously look to cut costs, and they look to go offshore for cladding. They ask, is this cladding up to standard? They are told yes, because the person who sells it isn't going to say no. It gets brought in, and then someone throws a cigarette butt out the window.
Yeah, a lot of the cladding that does get brought in is tested to Australian standards.
Right.
The problem is that, or back then, the testing was done for a fire coming from one side of the cladding. The problem with La Crosse and what happened in Grenfell Tower was the fire coming up from underneath.
From inside, essentially.
And, in fact...
How come the person that flicks a cigarette isn't the one who has to cop it?
Well, let's go bushfire season now.
That's the thing, right? In a bushfire, if someone was to deliberately set a fire or stupidly throw a cigarette out the window of a car, and I remember growing up, there are all ads all over the place. So if you see someone who throws a cigarette out the car window, dob them in. And the belief is that they would be in trouble for causing what will become a bushfire that could become quite deadly or affect property. Following Black Saturday, you saw a number of cases where people were taken to court because they were blamed for starting the fires.
Yes.
So I can't understand, and I think they get about a 3% role in the cost of starting the fire, yet they were 100% the reason why the fire started. They flicked the cigarette out the window.
Yeah, oh look, at a personal level, I believe anyone who starts a bushfire or is responsible for starting a bushfire has probably got a life imprisonment, particularly if you've got someone who's loses their life because it's manslaughter. Absolutely.
Steve, appreciate your time.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Hope you recover from that flu.
And you too.